So hello from Green-Mopeds in West London. So today we're going to look at the Blueshark R1 Model 80, and we've put it next to the Niu NQiGTS because technically it's similar, and also that the NIUs are typically regarded as the most smartest of smart scooters. But as you'll see, this one has possibly surpassed it. So we'll do what we normally do, and we'll go around the bike and show you some of those features, and hopefully that'll help you make an informed decision. So let's get to it. So just a little bit about Sharkgulf. So they're out of Shanghai. This bike has actually been around for about a year, but it won the 2020 Design Award that the likes of Horwin and others have won. It actually comes in 4 versions. There's what's called the Model 45, and 45 stands for kilometers an hour. So it's a 28 mile an hour 50cc licensed moped. And then there's the Model 80, which is this one, which is again 80 kilometers an hour or 50 miles an hour. So this is a 125cc license. And then within each model, there are 2 versions. There is what's called the Light, and then there is this one, which I sort of called the Premium. The Light model is without pretty much everything that I'm just about to talk about, other than the core technology of a motor and batteries and stuff like that. But in terms of the smart stuff that it does, the Light versions don't have any of this. Anyway, so starting at the front of the bike, as you can see, they sort of try and derive the name of the bike as Shark from this sort of front mouth. It might be a bit too bright to tell, but there are actually quite a few bikes coming out of China now with this sort of design. Cineco have also got one that looks pretty similar. NIU you're sort of all aware of. So at the front we've got 12-inch wheels. NIUs are 14, pretty much standardised. We have got combined braking here, so 2 calipers. In other words, when you squeeze the right-hand lever, you will get front and back brakes applied together. It's not ABS, it's CBS. Okay, the bike is 1.88 metres long, so about 6 foot. And it weighs, without the batteries, which are 11 kilos, weighs about 90 kilos. So pretty sort of standard stuff. As you can see, it is made for 2 people because it's got the pegs and things to hold on to. But one of the first differences you'll note about this bike is actually at the back. So typically, electric mopeds are going to have a motor in the rear wheel, whereas this one has a motor mounted on the wheel, if you like. So it's 5 kilowatts. If you compare that to, that's max, if you compare that to the 2022 NQiGTS, that's 4.6 kilowatts. So it's a little bit more powerful. They argue that doing it this way is more efficient than a hub motor, although I can't really see why, but that's what they say. So 5 kilowatts max, okay? So that's about 6-7 horsepower, okay? But it means that it makes a bit of noise, and I'll show you that in a minute, okay? The rest of the bike is pretty standard. Underneath the seat, we have 2 batteries, and these are 48 volt ones, not 60 as in NIU, okay? This space here does take an open face helmet, okay? So one of the things that you need to be aware of from the beginning about this bike is that there's no rack option, okay, unfortunately. Maybe not yet. I mean, there seems to be a space for one. As you can see, the slot has been made for one there, but currently there is no rack option. So this is basically where you will store your helmet and obviously a lock and chain and all that sort of stuff while you're riding. But one of the first sort of clever bits of tech that they've got is there are no cables. So you can literally lift out a battery like that, and you can put it into its charging cradle. If you want to charge both batteries off the bike, you can obviously do that. And that means it's very simple, and the way you get it back is literally just lift. Okay. So no cables, pretty clever. You'll also notice that little light underneath the seat there. And while we're talking about lights, you might just be able to see this sort of light effect going around the back. They call that a light curtain. I guess it's just so you don't trip over the back of the bike when you're parking up at night, or just to help you in general see what's behind you when you are moving the bike around. While we're at the back also, you might want to start taking note of some of these things. So here and all around the bike are 74 sensors. And one of the things that this bike does is it sort of helps you as you ride around by doing things like having a rear camera. Okay, so none of this sort of tech exists on an NIU. Okay, so we'll come back to that, but just to finish off on the batteries. So these are 48 volt, 30 amp hour batteries. Okay, so that gives you 1.44 kilowatt hours of juice. Okay, if you were to compare that to 60 volt, 30 amp hour, or as in the ER version of the NQiGTS, they are 60 volts by 35 amp hours, then you're looking at, for one battery on an NIU, you're looking at 1.9 for one, and you get 2 in the NQiGTS, okay? Whereas these are 2.8 kilowatt hours for both. Another comparison you might want to make is if you put that alongside a Niu NQiGTS, as in the blue one over there in the corner, that has one 2.8 kilowatt hour battery, and you can have 2 in that bike. Okay, so in actual fact, the Niu NQiGTS is hard to beat in terms of range because of 2.8 kilowatts times 2 potentially that you can have. Okay, but what that means in practice is that this has got 2.8 kilowatt hours, and that will give you, in reality, about 50 miles of range. Okay, so this is definitely sort of like a commuting sort of bike. Okay, just to sort of go around the edge a bit more, so you've got center stand, side stand. Notice it's got keyway. So this bike is actually imported by MotoGP, and then it's branded up as a keyway bike, but it is Sharkgulf Technologies, okay, and Blueshark is the name. At ECMA last year, as an aside, on the keyway stand, they had something called an H series bike, which is sort of like a step down from this one. Okay, so the design of this bike, you sort of either love it or don't, but it isn't necessarily that you're buying this bike for. So again, if you look at the front of the bike, we now have another camera. So this bike actually has front and rear cameras, and one of the things that you can do with this is record your trip. Okay, so if we come to the actual sort of heart of why we're showing you this bike, it's this dashboard. Okay, so this is a 10-inch, obviously colour screen. NIU now do a sort of screen, but it doesn't have things like a mapping system built in. So this is from a company called Here. That's the technology that they've embedded. And when I say mapping system, it is really just location. It's not, you know, type in an address and it will give you a route. It's not route guidance, but neither is the NIU system either. It's using your phone and then displaying your phone. But as you can see, so you always know sort of essentially where you are, and that's obviously where we are, Green-Mopeds. Okay, so as you see on this dashboard, it talks about the charge of the batteries, and then you've got all these sort of sensors around the bike. Okay, so if you go into ready, and for example, you start up the bike, okay, on the right-hand side here, you can see things like what power it's actually consuming. Nothing too special about that. But if you turn on the indicators, for example, there you have the rear view mirror. Okay, so this is obviously to help you look behind you, sort of complementary to your lifesaver, if you like. And that's the first thing that it can do. Okay, it's giving you rear view as you turn left or right. Now, the way you get into a lot of these smart features, for safety reasons, is actually to come out of ready. So you're in parked, and then through the dash, if I just show you some of the dash, you've got normal things. So this actually means to do with playing music, which is another feature it's got, and it's got reverse gears, so for example, and there's your mode, so up and down, 1, 2, 3. You've got how to get through the menu system here, and accessing the menu system, we'll come back to that. And on the left-hand side, you've got your indicators, which make noises you heard, cruise control, which is not unique, but not all bikes have them. And then this button here, which is access to the actual menu. So pressing on this button while in parked mode gives you access to all of these features. Okay, so, and you move through them by these buttons here. Okay, so we've got Bluetooth settings. So this is obviously just to connect your bike through the Bluetooth. Nothing special with that. You've got this ADAS system. So ADAS is the collision system, and also accident avoidance and things like that. So for example, you can have the turn assistance. So that is activating the rear mirror, okay, when you turn. You could turn it off don't see why you would, to be honest. Reversing assistance, so again, turning on the rear view mirror when you're going into reverse mode. Again, I don't see why you would turn that off. Okay, then you've got settings within the bike. So you've got language, which is fairly obvious. You've got system of measurement, so you can just switch between metric and imperial, and you can manage all the maps. So by that I mean, they actually download the maps to your bike. Okay, so if I was in Austria and I wanted to download the Austrian map, then I would go through there, through Wi-Fi, download that map, and there you go. Okay. Then you've got ArcRide. So ArcRide is actually the system that runs this bike, and this is Android based as it goes. A bit like an NIU, you can check for firmware updates and things like that. Okay. Fingerprints. So you can actually control the bike and turn it on through a fingerprint. So you just register your fingerprint in there. So this is a bit like on a Sunra Robo S. You can use this so that you don't have to use the fob to start the bike. Okay, so that's that. Driver recorder. So this is general recording of your trip. This is not, left or right turn. This is just so you can record your trip. You're on holiday, you want to take a note of what you're doing, etc., etc. So that one can do that, and then you can upload it to Facebook or what have you. Okay. And then you have Bluetooth music, which is essentially, as it says, but this is playing music through the speakers of the bike, okay? These two down here. Okay, so again, whether you would want to do that while riding, not too sure, okay? But anyway, you get the song up and then you can press play and away you go, okay? Okay, enough of that. All right. Then Bluetooth phone call, again, playing through the speakers of the bike. Not sure I would do that. I think I would rather have it through a headset, but anyway, you have that feature. And then you've got messages about the bike. So this will be warning messages and things like that. And then you've got the information about the bike itself. So this is, again, a bit similar to an NIU. So you can look at the battery information, functional status, days to go to your next service, which is quite handy. Check, self-check, again, pretty similar to NIU. Then you've got something called the scooter control. So this has a couple of features. So the light carpet is the thing that I showed you at the beginning, where the light's at the back. And then it's got something called a virtual room, which I'm not sure many people are going to like or use. Okay, so that is... Okay. Sure about that one, to be honest, but anyway, it's a noise if you wanted a noise. It's not totally unheard of. The Adia AA Cargo has exactly the same thing, I think. So you might want to turn that back off again. Okay, and then we're back to the beginning. Okay, so as you can tell, a lot of things that you could do within this bike. Okay, when you go into ride mode, it's a few features that you get, again, through the same button. You get the ability to change the dashboard from light to dark. You also get, like that, okay, distance since, information about distance since you last used the bike, etc., etc. And I think the music control is the other one, okay? So essentially that's the functions of the bike. So quite an extensive thing to actually get to grips with. Anyway, so when you are riding the bike, so you're using the controls mostly around here, as you can see, I've got my modes here, and I'm in mode 3, I can go up and down, etc., etc. I've got reverse, and what's happening is, as you see, 50 miles an hour, but you've also got this thing called boost mode, which is, or turbo mode as they call it. And what this is about acceleration from the beginning. It's not about when you use it, when you ride, it won't make much of a difference. This is purely about takeoff, okay? Okay, so what this is doing is actually pretty clever stuff, or at least I think so. So how does the turbo boost mode work? So the easiest way to explain it is by thinking about the batteries again. So when you have a dual battery bike, most of the time they're being used in parallel. In other words, 48 by 30, 48 by 30, you're getting 48 out of the batteries and you're combining the capacities of both the bikes. So in other words, you're getting 48 by 60. That's what you're actually getting, Okay. Now what this bike is doing is it's doing that most of the time until you press the boost mode. When you press the boost mode, it's actually changing it to running in serial. So in other words, it's adding the voltage together. So in other words, 96 volt, and that's what's giving you the ability to do fast acceleration. Okay, so in other words, this 48 volt battery bike is turning into a 96 volt bike, okay, for the time that you press that button. So in other words, if you were to have these two side by side and they both had the same power, bearing in mind that NQiGTS 2022 is 4.6 kilowatts and this is 5 kilowatts, even if they were both the same, because this is using 96 volts while that button is pressed, this one should out-accelerate the NQi. Okay, so it's quite clever. I don't know any other bike that does that, and it is quite a neat trick. Obviously, you're affecting the capacity of the battery because you're draining it quicker, but if you want it, then that will help you. Again, if you are already doing 45 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour, pressing that button is going to have no effect because it's really just a boost, and most of that is being used for an acceleration. Okay, so pretty smart. Okay, so I think we've covered everything. Charging times about 3.5 hours. You can charge both bikes together, batteries together, as I've said. Colors, so the bike actually comes in 3 colors: this white, a black, and something called Blueshark blue, which is sort of like a metallic bluey green sort of color. Unfortunately, that one isn't brought in. Prices of this model are 4,349. Okay, the ER version of the 2022 NQiGTS is actually 4,799, so it is well priced. It's not on the grant, I guess that is one thing to say, but you have a 2-year warranty on it anyway, and with the experience that we've got in these bikes, I'm not too worried about the warranty on the batteries. We have yet to have many people who claim that their battery capacity is not what it should be after 3 years. Okay, so 4,349. Obviously the lower spec bikes, so like the light version is only 3,000, and then the other versions are somewhere in between. Okay, so all in all a very interesting bike. I guess the only downside is that there is no rack available. Initially when I saw this bike, I thought, why are they only picking 48 volt and not 60 at least? But now when you understand that that boost mode is actually combining the voltage to get you 96, it sort of makes sense. Okay, so hopefully that's helped. If you would like to come and test ride this bike, then please let us know. We're more than happy to do that. Please feel free to contact us on any of the channels that we use, and thanks very much.